Everyone, to the basics of wheelchair racing equipment. Today we are focusing on wheels, and we are so excited that you are able to join us again. This is our third session within this series, and we're super excited that we're actually going to be extending this series as well, at least into next week. There's some great topics, so we're excited that you're able to join us. Today's session is brought to you by Move United. I'm Lily Jagosinski. I'm an event specialist at Move United, and we are excited to have you here. If you haven't already checked out our Adapt at Home page, we list a variety of virtual events that are going on, and we encourage you to tag us at Move United Sport, as well as use the hashtag Adapt at Home to show us how you're moving. We'd like to just welcome again our panelists that we've had previously. We have Daniel Romanchuk, who is a world champion and major marathon winner. He is also a Paralympian. And we also have Krieger Skabort, who's a Paralympian and SB winner and an Ironman World Championship record holder. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. And we are super excited to have our special guest, Adam Bleakney, here. He is a head coach for men's and women's track and field, a three-time Paralympic track and field athlete, but he's also a coach, and he's coached athletes to 44 medals across 3 Paralympic Games. He's also coached athletes to 53 medals across 5 World Championships, and he's also been nominated the Paralympic Coach of the Year for multiple years. So welcome, Adam, to our group, and we are excited to have you. I'd like to also recognize that this session will be recorded. All attendees are on mute to minimize distractions, but there will be an opportunity for Q&A later on. So we encourage you to use the button at the bottom of your screen labeled Q&A, and you can submit questions at any point in time during the presentation. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kim Romanchuk. She is Daniel's manager, as well as happened to be his mom too, and she's going to be moderating our session today. Go ahead, Kim.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to review, this is a series that's aimed at beginning to intermediate level racers and all those who come into contact with the sport who just want to learn a little bit more about the equipment. Today, we are going to be covering the different types of wheels that are out there and some considerations you want to think about when choosing a type of wheel. Daniel will be doing that. Krieger is going to cover all the mysteries of what happens inside that hub of the wheel and as it attaches to the axle. And then we're just really happy to have Adam here with us, who's going to be covering the factors that you want to consider when you're trying to size a wheel and hand ring size for a particular athlete. And I'm thinking back, one of the biggest, most important developmental things that Daniel ever did was to come to camp out here at the University of Illinois. And so I wanted to turn it over to Adam to give you a little heads up about what camp is going to be like this year.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So we're going to do something that's a first for us, and that is a virtual camp. But it's creating some opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise have, and we're pretty excited about it. So it's July 6th through the 10th. We don't yet have a live registration. That's coming very soon, hopefully within the next week, if not earlier. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. So you can kind of look through. It's a blend of each session. The day starts out with a workout. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is a roller session. Tuesday, Thursday is a strength workout, with the idea that those are ones that can be done at home by the participants watching, both athletes and coaches and admins. And the second half is going to be more educational, geared not only to the athletes, but also to coaches and administrators. And we got some great guests. We got athletes that you get to work out with, like Aaron Pike and Brian Seaman, and Daniel will be featured on Friday as a roller session, and then Jennifer Fessmeyer and Ian Wong on Tuesday, Thursday, and strength review. And then we have some other special guests. We have doing some Chris Pearson, who's been involved in sports since the mid-'80s. We'll be talking about racing chair and how to fit yourself for a major an athlete for a racing chair. Suzanne Scorni will talk about nutrition, one of her specialties, and then we'll have a nice Q&A with a bunch of different Paralympians on Friday, just to open up the floor for questions. So we're looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great week. It's all free, so you can tune into as much or as little as you want, and free of charge, and hopefully Well, I'll enjoy it. I know we'll have a good time and hopefully share some knowledge and keep working forward and progressing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So as it was mentioned, we're going to be going over wheels today. So there are three primary kinds of rear wheels we use in wheelchair racing. There is a metal spoked wheel with a metal rim, and that rim can either be a clincher rim or a tubular rim. Then there are two different kinds of carbon fiber wheels. There are the carbon fiber disc wheels and carbon fiber quad spokes. And because both of those are carbon fiber, they only are able to use tubular tires. So going into a bit about the metal spoked, metal rimmed wheels. So these are pretty much the best choice for any beginner to intermediate racer. They are pretty economical. They're about a fifth the cost of a carbon fiber wheel, and they are also very durable. If a spoke happens to break, that is an easy thing to fix, and so they're a great choice for any beginner to intermediate racer. So some stuff about just how generally it's assembled and works. So you have the metal rim here, and that is held round and centered with respect to the hub by a symmetrical tension in all of the spokes. And so it is possible for that symmetry to become a little bit imbalanced. If it becomes imbalanced, you will see one of two things. If you spin the wheel, you can see the rim come up and down or bounce a little bit, or you can see it wobble side to side. If it is bad enough, it will sometimes even rub the tire against the fender over the affected part of the wheel. However, that is usually only when it gets really bad. You usually cannot see just by looking at it like this. You couldn't tell if this wheel is really true or not. I advise just taking your wheel to a bike shop and just ask them, hey, can you check, make sure this is true? And they should be able to true it, no problem. There is a way to check quick at home, but it is really hard to show on camera. And so we will unfortunately not be going over that. If you have a park stand and know how to true it yourself, it is possible to true it at home, but it is a very long and tedious process. So I suggest, again, just taking it in to a bike shop. So another thing with the metal spoked wheels, so I have a tubular rim here and a clincher over here. And so you can see these holes in the tubular. So these are where the spoke ends are. And on the clincher, you can see they are covered over with this red stuff. So this red stuff is called rim tape. And what that does is it prevents the tube from going down inside of one of these holes when it's fully inflated and possibly getting damaged. And so you have to make sure that if you're using a clincher that it has rim tape on it. If you are using a tubular tire, however, you need to make sure when you're gluing the tire on that you do not get glue inside of these holes, because that can possibly interfere with some maintenance further down the road. So that is pretty much all for the metal spoked wheels right now. So going into carbon fiber, as I mentioned, there are two different kinds. There are carbon fiber disc wheels and carbon fiber quad spokes. So I'm going to go into a little bit about the quad spokes. So these are a lot lighter and thus easier to accelerate than the disc wheels. They are also less susceptible to the effects of a crosswind. And because of those factors, they tend to be used by both sprinters and lighter athletes. So carbon fiber in general, how a carbon fiber wheel is made is there is a lightweight foam that is on the inside of the carbon fiber here. So there's just a lightweight foam sort of mold, and then that is just sandwiched on both sides with the actual carbon fiber itself. So that carbon fiber is actually what gives this wheel its stiffness. It's actually, carbon fiber is a lot stiffer than a typical metal rim, and so that combined with that stiffness combined with the general aerodynamics of these wheels actually allow these wheels to carry speed a little bit better than your typical metal. And so it's my opinion, sorry, I'm forgetting where I'm going here.
Disadvantages, maybe?
Right, disadvantages. Always good to have someone who can take you back on path. The disadvantages to carbon are, first of all, the price. They are, as I mentioned, around 5 times as expensive as a typical metal rimmed wheel. Between a disc and a quad spoke, there really is not much difference. But again, they're just a lot more expensive. The second point is that they are relatively fragile. I have damaged one by taking it out of a car before. I just bumped up against the side of the door and there was a gouge in my wheel. I think on this one, it might be hard to see, but there's a little bit of a pinpoint here. And that is when I think that just came from when I just let go of the wheel and it just sort of fell up against something and just put a hole in it. That is, it's basically my personal opinion that youth racers and beginning racers really don't need carbon fiber wheels. It's best to spend your money getting to camps and to competitions and really concentrating on your technique and things like that, and getting into things like carbon later. But when you do decide to get into carbon fiber wheels, a few things that you'll need to take into consideration are when you are inflating them, they do, most of the styles that are available now require a valve extender to inflate them. So this is a valve extender. I have one on right now, so you're gonna need to know how to install one of them and use that properly. The second is that this space is relatively tight, and so you will need the right kind of adapter to go on your pump or CO2, and just to make sure that everything fits in that tight space. So you just don't want to get stranded on the side of the road somewhere. Another thing that you want to be making sure of when you have a carbon fiber wheel is that you inspect it regularly for any kind of damage. So you want to make sure that you are in a well-lit area and you inspect it from many different angles. Because sometimes it's really hard to see, but as soon as you get it in that right light, it'll be there. So the two things you're going to want to watch out for are, again, focal points of impact, and then also during air travel, they can occasionally develop radial cracks in them as well. So those are the things you're going to want to watch out for. If you do see damage, do not touch it. The carbon fibers could end up in your finger, and believe me, it's not a fun time. I think with that, I think we are basically, that is the different kinds of wheels that are out there. But the one thing that relatively stays the same is this area here. And so this is called the hub. And Krieger, can you kind of explain what's going on inside of there?
Yeah, Daniel, I remember the days when carbon fiber was just a dream for me. I don't know, Coach Adam might remember those days as well. I remember so well using tape to tape my spoke rims so I can feel like carbon fiber. Man, that was the cheap way of going carbon fiber, or the poor man's way of going carbon fiber. Well, we're lucky nowadays we can buy it, and it's available for us. Yeah, okay, so the hub, like the hub, like it says, you know, hub is kind of the heart of the wheel, or basically everything rotates around the hub and the axle. Usually, most of these hubs are made of aluminum and carbon fiber sometimes, if you're lucky and you can afford a carbon fiber hub. Carbon fiber is a little bit more expensive, but you know, these hubs are made with very tight tolerances, so it's really a precision made item, and it's so important because your bearings has to fit in there exactly. They don't just slide in, they have to be pressed in exactly so the wheel can spin in a perfect rotation. So this, what you see here is a little spoke hub. The one way just to immediately notice it's a spoke hub is you can see the little hole on the flanges, the little holes. There's 5 holes on these little hubs on each flange, and those are the spoke attachment points, which go out to the rim, and just, you know, basically everything is held together by the spokes. And in the inside there, you'll see the bearings, kind of a darker color. That's the bearing, a small little bearing, and then there's a hole, and that's where the axle is going to fit through. So, okay, yeah, this is spoke hub. Let's switch over to a carbon hub. Okay, so this is a disc wheel. That's the outside part of the hub on a disc wheel. Now, it really actually is exactly the same as what you saw on the previous hub, on the previous slide. The hub is inside the carbon. You just cannot see it. And there's no spoke holes. So the hub is also just, you know, bonded into the carbon fiber. It's quite a process, I think. You know, you cannot just, it's not any guy's little workshop outside in this garage that can, you know, bolt wheels and bond these together, because those hubs, if they're not bonded in exactly the way to make the wheel run true, there's no, I remember my first set of carbon wheels, we made it in my area, and my wheels was not true. I was a little bit all over the show. And then from there, I went back to spoke wheels. It definitely was not a success. So a lot of research and precision work in the carbon hubs. Then in the center there, you'll see that little hole. That is actually where your tool will fit when you attach the wheel to the frame. So in this case, it's an Allen wrench. It's an Allen wrench that hold the wheel, that you tie the wheel down to the frame. All right, let's see the inside part of the wheel. That's the inside part of the hub. Again, you know, on the inside there, you cannot really see the hub. You see just the protrusion part of the inside flange of the hub, and also the axle. So the axle in this particular wheel, the axle is permanent into the axle, so you cannot really just take it out. And that outer edge of the axle is, that's the thread, of course, and the thread is going to screw into your frame. Also very strong part of the chair, because if the axle breaks, you can just think what happened. And that axle is not that big. It's only about a 1/2 inch and some of them are hollow as well. But yeah, it fits really well into the axle. I mean, into excuse me, into the hub itself. All right, what is this now? The axle bearing assembly. Okay, so on the far right, you'll see the axle itself. In black is the axle. And then you'll see the two little bearings in blue, marked in blue. Now, in general, you wouldn't see the bearings, right? Because the bearings will be covered by the hub. And then between the two bearings, you see that little spacer. I marked it in red. So the spacer is there just to keep the bearings from pushing inward and have an even pressure from the inside and the outside of the bearings. So that is really important part of the bearing assembly, although you don't really actually see it. It's mostly inside the hub, right? And then of course, all of that is screwed all the way into the bearing assembly. I mean, into the camber bushing on the far left. And that camber bushing you see there, that is part of the racing chair. So when you get a chair that's already in, that's not part of the wheel. So it's a totally different component of the wheel. What else about the camber bushing? Okay, yep. Let's go over and see the bearings. Yeah, you got two photos of two bearings. One is sealed, and the other one I took the seal off actually, so you can just see the balls of the bearing. So the inner part, or the most important part of the bearing, is everything you see there. You know, all works together. It's only 4 real parts of the bearing. So on the bottom right, you'll see the inner race, what they call the inner race. And then on the bottom left arrow, you'll see the outer race, that's on the outside. And then on the top left with the red arrow, you see the balls, you know, in the inner, inside the housing of the bearing. And then the outside is the seal. So if you go back to the inner race, that the red arrow on the right side, that part of the bearing is actually never moves. Because everything spins around the inner race. So the balls will roll around the inner race, and what will hold the balls in place is the outer race, and of course, to some extent the seal as well, but not so much, because those bearings that you see there, they actually run in a trace. So your bearings, when you open the bearing, take the seal off, you're not gonna, you know, bearing's not gonna fall out of the casing. Now a lot of times, you know, people think you always have to clean your bearings and take the seal off, but no, it's not necessary to do that. You as long as you keep that bearing sealed and safe, it's hardly ever that you're going to open it and clean it. But if you do spin your wheel and you hear crunching sound, or you can feel that there's a noise inside your wheel, it is very possible that there's some dirt in your bearing. So you can take it off. Yeah, you can take the seal off, clean it out a little bit, and then add but only a little bit grease to it. Use a rule of thumb there is you add 1/3 of the amount or the volume that's available with grease. So not too much and not too little, because I think, you know, if it's too much, you're gonna impair the spin of the bearing. But yeah, the bearings are, you know, it's an integral part. It's such an important part of the racing chair. I've done quite a bit of research on bearings lately. It's fun. I've messed up on bearings a lot. They are expensive, unfortunately, but you don't always have to replace them. They usually last a long time on the wheels, sometimes just forever. Okay, spacers. Okay, so here, this is a good example of the spacer that I showed earlier. that spacer is the one that is between the two bearings, right? And to keep the bearings apart and have even pressure from inside and outside. Bearings in general does not like linear bearings like this. They don't like to have a pressure from the side. It just slows the bearing down. So you can see on that little arrow there, the spacer drops. Now in spoke wheels, you see this often as well, where the spacer drop or a spacer move around. It's not a big deal. You just have to line it up again and make sure when you enter your axle pin, just use your pinky and move it out and center it so you can get your axle all the way through to the bearing. And this is only on zip wheels. You don't have or on spoke wheels. You don't have this issue on carbon fiber. I mean, on Kurima wheels, I'm sorry. The next slide on spacers, what do we have? Okay, right, so we covered the inside spacer. That's the one on the left there, between the two bearings, right? So, but then a really important thing for all athletes, especially when you travel, is to have extra spacers. So as you can see in the bottom there, I marked that little spacer, the one that is between the bearing and facing the camber bushing. So that little spacer is there just to align the wheel so it runs in the center of the fender. So if that spacer is too wide, it's going to run too far out, or if it's too narrow, it's going to run too far in, and it's probably going to hit your fender or some part of your chair, and it's going to slow you down. A lot of times you can just hear it, or you can feel the heat on your side if you have any sensation in your hips. So at the top, you'll see there, I have a couple, I always have different size spacers. Now, the thin one, and then a medium size and a wider one. I would say this time of the year, because it's in the winter, I'm a little bit overweight. And so I added one of the little thin spacers on the far left, because my hips push the fenders out a little bit. So it's always an issue of exact fit there. It's not a one-time fit and it's going to be okay forever, because you might have different size tires, and then you're going to change the width of your spacers as well. Okay, that's it about spacers. Let's talk about camber now. Okay, so I think the most important or the most common question I get is, why are the wheels angled like that? Two questions: how fast can that thing go, and why are the wheels angled like that? Now, my first reason would be, for everyone to kind of understand, is just the base of the chair is a little bit wider and bigger if you have angled wheels, and just to make the chair less tippy, and it's a safety thing, and you can cruise easier through turns if there's an angle. Now, usually it's between 11 degree and about 13, sometimes up to 15 degree camber. Now, in the next slide, I can show you how they do this camber. If you can flip it over, there you go. They'll see. Okay, so the camber is actually inside the camber bushing. So if you look from the top and the bottom one, the hole is on an angle, and that hole in the bushing is on 11 degrees. And then if you look at the top, you can see the angle of the axle itself, which will be the wheel, is on an 11-degree angle. And yeah, that gives you an angle, but there's a lot more to it, and it's things like the athlete's build, and how long your arms are, and what differences that can play a big role into camber as well. So let's jump over and see if Coach Adam can give us a little bit more information on camber and that kind of thing.
All right, will do, Krieg. Thanks, and Daniel, that was great stuff. So let me know. I'm supposed to get screen control at some point, but I don't have that yet.
Thanks, Adam,
Totally
for
there.
your patience. We are just getting over
Oh, that's
to
all
that.
right.
My apologies on that. So
Sure.
feel free to continue on, and we'll make sure you have that permission on our end.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. So, so I'm going to talk a little bit about wheel size selection, and just to because that certainly there are very easy decisions to be made on wheel size selection for younger athletes. Just starting a 24-inch wheel is clearly the right choice, and then as you move up and move into a 26 and ultimately maybe a 28 or maybe not. And so, but there are a lot more cases that are not necessarily distinct and easily identified. And so I'll talk a little bit about and hopefully show you guys too, just some techniques and some best practices. But a lot of qualifiers too, and that is people that know me that ask me questions. I qualify a lot of what I say because I can make a bold pronouncement and immediately somebody can offer an outlier, somebody that directly counters what I said, and also won 18 gold medals at Paralympic Games doing so. So it's what I'm going to give you is some themes and ideas to just to use, and then you work from there, right? It's like good writing. You know the rules of grammar, and you work off of that. It doesn't have to exactly follow that, but you understand what some of those tenets are. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and can everybody see that? That needs to see it. Yeah. Okay. So that's we're going to talk about wheel size selection. Let me see if I can get this out of the way too. There we go. So usually what I do is I'll work back from the optimal. So in this case, the optimal is, and I'm going to go off script and show you guys just a couple quick videos of what I'm referencing. So hopefully you can now see a couple videos. And so the optimal is creating the appropriate hand ring coverage so that the athlete's able to access an appropriate contact angle. That's just the time that they're on the ring and the point from where initial contact is made to the point of release. And there's an optimal area that we like to see the athletes hit. So having known that, then we can work backwards from that in a very linear fashion. So I'm going to start with, this is an athlete that's missing a little bit of coverage. So you can see it's a really early contact, about 12 o'clock, and then coming off about 4:30 with effective contact, maybe 4 o'clock. Very nice stroke, but there's an opportunities there to look at ways we can enhance and optimize that contact angle. And then if we look at an athlete here, this guy was a 800 meter world champion, and you can see the difference in that contact. It's a little different angle, of course, but you can clearly see the difference in terms of his contact coming in at 2 o'clock, pushing back, and an incredibly dynamic release. So he's working the back of the ring in a very, very effective way. And let me get my little pointer up here, and I can show you what we're looking for. This is this area right here on the ring. So about 4 o'clock back to this area, 8 o'clock on the ring where we're moving into, I won't get in too much into the stroke. That's not what I'm supposed to talk about today, but you can see a very dynamic and explosive movement. Whereas with the athlete on the left, there's some limitation in terms of optimizing the force application on the ring. And we want to work toward a better solution. And so let's go back to my slides. And so I will say too, here's my first qualifier, is that even the athlete that I just showed you on the left, it's more than just wheel size and hand ring size. Positioning in the chair also is critical. Camber 2 as Krieg referenced. So it's really hard to isolate one variable and say, I'm just going to change this, because they're married and things work in concert. So, but at least having an understanding of if this change is made, then this change will consequentially be made as well. Those I think are important. So, but as we work back, so we know what the optimal contact angle is, what the stroke should look like. So how do we get there? And if we think about wheel selection, well, then we have to backtrack and think about hand ring size selection, and from that we have to backtrack and think about body segments and measurements. And one thing that I found, and I've been using this system for about 10 years, and it's and this is what you're seeing on your screen now is really just a gross generalization of what we do, but it's taking a measurement from the proximal area of the radius. So this is the head of the radius, and then to this knuckle here. And you just use a tape measure, and usually I'll have an athlete put their hand in a fist, and I'll have them flex, and then I'll put my finger right where the elbow hinges, and as the athlete moves up and down, I can get my finger right in this area, and it's right here. This is where that elbow is hinging. If you take that measurement, whatever you arrive at, you can use that as a reference point for hand ring selection. We've got a little more sophisticated formula that we use that accommodates for different gloves choice. So whether you have a flat glove that's solid or a flat glove that's a harness, or if you have a groove glove, a finger thumb groove. So because that builds an artificial length and reach on the hand. And so we can accommodate for that too. But this is a good reference point. If I'm ever measuring athletes for chairs when they come in to visit, that's always a measurement that I'll take. And we found that it validates across a lot of different athletes at multiple levels, from novice all the way up to world champions and Paralympic gold medalists. And I'm not smart enough to explain exactly why that is and the physics behind it. I would defer that to someone with the appropriate degree, but there's an optimal ratio between this measurement that you're looking at here and the diameter of the hand ring, and then the way that this lever works across the active force application on the hand ring. So hopefully I'm not going too fast. I think, let me just re-emphasize that the measure that we're looking for hand ring size is right at the hinge of the elbow, right to the knuckle. And you probably, I wouldn't say you can do it yourself, you probably have to have somebody else do it for you. And then it's not going to be precise. Hand rings come in size 14, 14 and a half, 13, 13 and a half, generally half-inch increments. You can get quarter-inch increments too. But just find the best. It gives you the ballpark. So if you measure just under 14 and 3/4, go to 14 and 3/4, 14 and a half. You get the idea. So that is. And then any questions too on that from anybody is in a follow-up here or later. I'm happy to share that. Okay, so that doesn't really answer yet wheel size selection, and so I want to go to that too. And I have some different athletes up here I just want to talk through real quick. But what do we look at? So if we have an athlete that's on the border, and I have some athletes where there's some guess of, well, should we put them on a 26 or should they be on a 28? Because they're really on the borderline of being able to access that bottom of the ring effectively and apply force. And so they tend to make contact early and they release early. And that's just not optimal in terms of creating the torque that you want to create linear straight ahead speed to go fast and to enjoy the speed of the sport. So as a rule of thumb, generally what I'll look at is I try to get a hand ring size. If it's within about 45 to 50% of the diameter of the wheel, then I feel pretty good about that. So if I measure somebody and they're at, many females are about a 14-inch hand ring size, that's just the natural. Generally, at least on the women that I've measured, that tends to be the measurement on that forearm. Then they're in the ballpark of within that 45 to 50%. Once you get into that 13 inches and below, 12 and a half, 12 and 3/4, then there's some consideration. Well, should we put this athlete on a 26, or should we keep them on a 26? Maybe they're growing, right? And we don't know if they should make the jump up to a larger wheel. That's generally the line where I delineate between, you're definitely going to jump on a 28, and we'll probably keep you on we're going to keep you on a 26. So, anyways, we'll look at a couple athletes and here that on this diagram here. So we have two T54 athletes here, GD and Aaron. Pretty clear, very clear cut, easy to assess and know that these guys are going to be on 28-inch wheels. GD's pushing a 15-inch hand ring. Aaron's got a little longer arm, so he's pushing 15 and a half, I think 15 and 3/4 rings in this video. You can see here, perfect contact angle off the release. Both these guys are moving into the hand position that we want. They're not quite there yet, but they're just during that initial release phase. So pretty easy and clear cut. The remaining athletes I put up here because they're not as clear. So this is Jessie Galley. She was world record holder and multi-time gold medalist and a lot of other great things. She was really on the border of potentially could we put her on a 26 or should she be on a 26? Maybe just given her segments and length of forearm. But she stayed on the 28-inch wheel and was very, very successful and pushed a 14-inch hand ring. And so what we were able to do is modify the biomechanics to access a little bit more of the back of the ring and optimize the force application that she was able to access in order to be pretty successful. This gentleman down here, Ryan Chalmers, who was a Paralympian and pushed across the U.S. a few years back. He was in the same boat as Mill. So a little shorter on the arm length, but and we tried him out on a 26-inch wheel, and what we found was he just wasn't as effective as on a larger wheel. His cadence went up, so his strokes per minute went up dramatically, and his efficiency too. Now, granted, he didn't train very long on a 26. I think given time and the opportunity to train that wheel size, then you'd see some changes in biomechanics and potentially some different results. So these two, so Anjali Forder-Pratt, she's one in which she started with me in 2006, and she pushed on a 28-inch wheel. Really struggled, and we moved her down to 26, which what that allowed us to do was, instead of having her on a 13-inch ring or a 12 3/4-inch ring on a 28-inch wheel, we could put her on the same size hand ring but on a smaller wheel, and provide her a better ratio in terms of being able to apply force and create torque. And she's a Paralympian medalist and world record holder. I'm running over my time. I got 1 minute left, so I'm gonna bust through this one. So there are always we all have unique body types and functional capacities, and so you really just need to be work around those parameters. So this is another one of my athletes from many years ago, very successful, Mia, who had some limited range of motion in her arms and wasn't necessarily able to achieve full extension at the elbow. So we put on our 26, but then maximized her hand ring size. So we put on a hand ring that was much bigger, because that gave her a little bit more active time on the ring. So in which she was actually engaging the wheel forward, and that worked for her. That worked for her. So I put her in this mix just to. I'm a man who qualifies things, and just so I think you need to be flexible. But I think that's a good rule of thumb is to work from is work off of, in summary, work off of the knuckle to elbow measurement as a reference point for hand ring size. Then compare that to wheel size and the ratio of hand rings in diameter to wheel diameter. And then do your best then to move around and experiment and find the athlete. And again, as I said earlier, positioning has a huge component to this too. Glove selection too. My last point. I know I'm running over time, but my last point is, if I can put an athlete on a 28-inch wheel, I will. I don't have any athletes currently that push on a 26, and I have a few athletes that are right on the border in terms of arm length that potentially they could go on a 26 based on what I've just told you. But I do everything I can to put them on a larger wheel because it allows them to engage while they're applying force to the ring. They're moving further, right? It's just a bigger wheel size. So the time that they're driving that wheel forward becomes more effective because it's a larger wheel. And that's not all. Momentum plays a huge component to this too. But it just, I think it creates a more efficient system. And so then what we do to work around that is a lot of it is glove selection. And I can artificially create arm length with athletes based on the glove that we use. And then you combine that with optimizing their seating. And again, always going back to that initial primary goal of understanding what the optimal contact angle and coverage of the hand ring is, and knowing that this is where we want to put the athlete, and then you just work backwards in a linear fashion and make changes and modifications in order to best put them in that position. And it won't always work out perfectly, and that's okay. That's just the way. That's just the nature of it. But you do your best to move back toward that ideal. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'm going to pass it back to Kim or whoever I'm supposed to pass it back to. So let me stop sharing, and
Great.
And I'll do so. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Adam. That was really interesting to see all the different combinations that you were able to brainstorm and put together. I think referring to one of those pictures, we have a question. We are going to move into the Q&A right now. We have a question of what size rim did Mia use?
I have no idea. That was like 2000. That was over 12 years ago. So I would guess it's a fairly good size. So in the image that I showed you, she's on a 26-inch Zip 404, which actually worked out pretty good. It's a spoke wheel with a deep dish rim, and I would guess she was on. We had her like on a 15 or 16-inch hand ring, but again, because that was the only way I could give her like 5 hours of coverage on the hand ring. Otherwise, she was forced to come off early. So, I don't know what the size was. I'm sorry, but that was roughly 15 inches.
Okay, great. Now I have another question here. I'm currently on a 700C size wheel with a 14-inch hand rim, but have short arms. My forearm measurement is 12.5 inches. What would you recommend in this scenario? Can you change to a smaller 26-inch wheel without changing the frame?
Okay, so to answer your second question, can you change? Yeah, you can run a smaller rear wheel on your frame. You also have to then accommodate for the change in alignment. Because as you drop that, you drop the back of the frame, then the alignment changes too. So I've done that. I've just put an 18-inch front wheel on, and that tends to maintain the alignment, but then you have to worry about braking and whether it works on the fork. The other thing too is it's not necessarily going to help. You're not going to get any more reach because where your shoulder is positioned relative to the axle, which is what I key off of, doesn't change because the frame is built for a 28-inch wheel. It's not built for a 26. So to the first part of your question, what I would recommend, so if you have a 12.5-inch measurement, a 14-inch ring, if you can position yourself to go deeper in the frame, right? And I don't know if you can functionally, right? That's also a constraint, is what type of balance and stability do you have in your core in order to sit with knees a little bit lower and butt a little bit lower. So that's one part to it. But if you were one of my athletes, I would put you on a different set of gloves to try to get you another 2+ inches of reach via the glove, to get you in a better approximation of arm length to hand ring diameter. And so that's it. We try to make some biomechanical changes to get access to the back of the ring. And I think that works pretty effectively. It takes some patience. I currently have a couple of athletes that we're working through the same thing, and it's very successful. Very successful, actually. That just by simply, we didn't even change seating position. All I did was change the constraint of the gloves and gave them another 2 to 3 hours of coverage on the back of the ring where we're looking for it to occur.
Great. Actually, speaking to this question about gloves, I've got a couple of them here about how do we get extra inches on the gloves specifically, and if the measuring method that you used from the elbow to the knuckle, what kind of a glove is that based on, and how would you modify that depending on a different glove? Does that, I'm not sure if I'm conveying that question correctly, but
okay. What was the first question?
the first question is, how do you get extra inches on the glove?
Oh, okay. So it would just be the build of the glove. So you can either, you can build your own glove, of course, if you want, and if you have the skill set and access to the materials. Krieg could build you a glove, or you can order them from Ingenium, and there's a few different styles that offer that type of extension and reach. It wouldn't be a flat glove. A flat glove or a harness glove will not create that additional reach for you. You have to use a style that I call it a finger thumb style. That's just what was passed on to me. It's based on the style of a biomechanical style from the 1980s and some of the ways the gloves were built then, albeit they were built out of handball gloves and loads and loads of tape. Thankfully, that was before my era, but Krieg certainly had to spend a lot of time taping his gloves up, I'm sure. However, so I guess if you can order them, and you can get a pair of 3D printed gloves that would provide exactly what I'm referencing. So here's my qualifier to that, is that if you've only pushed on a flat glove or a harness glove, there's a learning curve to a finger thumb style, because any flat glove is very generous in terms of where you make contact and interface the hand and the hand ring. It's very easy. It's a much shallower learning curve. But when you start to move into a more defined groove, the challenge is that you have to be much more precise and understand to be able to coordinate your hand in space at increasingly higher velocities. And that takes time. But I will say it's time well spent. It's time well spent. I think it provides an optimized adhesion to the ring, and it will also enhance your biomechanics and your stroke, is what I mean to say. And ultimately, I think even if you take a couple steps backward in terms of long-term development, it's worth that time. So that was the first part of this question. Then there was a second one, I know.
Okay, the second one was the measurement that you used. What kind of glove were you basing that with?
No glove at all. That is a arm with no glove on it at all. No glove on it at all.
And
yeah.
and that
so we found that And again, that's a very gross generalization. It works and it validates, but you may need to move up a half inch or down a half inch. But we have a little more precise formula that we use that accommodates for a flat glove, either a harness or a solid flat glove, and then different variations of the finger thumb, a single finger, double finger, and then different angles of the groove, which give you different extensions off of the base of the thumb in terms of additional reach.
Okay, great. And I think we are tentatively planning a session that we will talk about gloves a little bit more and show the different kinds of gloves for those of you who are beginners and don't know about all these different types that are being referred to. It is Ingenium Manufacturing is the 3D glove printing company that you can order some of these that Adam's been speaking about. We have a bunch of questions and we're not going to have time for all of them. This is a question to Krieg. What kinds of bearings would you say are best to use?
Oh boy, there's so many kinds of bearings. Definitely a sealed bearing. Okay, so you get bearings like this that you can buy off the shelf that's open, or you get a bearing like this that already has a seal on, and I definitely suggest get a seal bearing, because these bearings, they just get dirt in and then they don't last for very long. But I think the question is more maybe what kind of bearings, in the sense of a pure stainless steel bearing, or like this one is a stainless steel bearing, and this would be a hybrid ceramic bearing. So the ceramic bearings are really expensive. This can be up to $100 for one bearing. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception sometimes. You know, ceramic bearing sounds fantastic. It's expensive and it rolls very well, but I do think a ceramic makes a big difference when the revolution of the bearing goes up to maybe 10,000 or so, and we'll never get, so they can handle heat a whole lot more than a regular steel bearing or stainless steel bearing. If you do want to get a ceramic bearing, I would say go for a hybrid ceramic bearing that's got ceramic ball bearings, but the casing is stainless steel. So that's called a ceramic hybrid, and it's not that expensive. But a regular old stainless steel bearing is maybe 20, 25, I would say, just as good, as long as the size is correct, the right size. This is a 1/2 inch diameter, almost 1/2 inch on the inside. I don't have the exact outsides, but a 1/2 inch on the inside is the measurement.
Great. We have time for just one quick question left before we close out. And Adam, what ages, we've had this asked a couple times, what ages is the camp open to?
0 to 110. So anybody is available.
So I'm okay. I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in. Barely. You're barely in. You're barely in.
There you go.
Can I answer these last two questions in about 15 seconds? I see John Boy has one about measurement method for his glove. So John Boy, I'm sure you're listening, but if you're using like a finger thumb groove, what I found is that you can use a ring that's about 8% larger to 10% larger than whatever your measurement is, and you'll still be okay because you have that extra reach. So try to get it within about, you can add about, as I said, about plus 8 to 10%. You'll still get pretty good contact. And then the second question, best position of the shoulder, relation frame of the chair. That's really dependent on your disability level and your anthropometric, so body size. I don't really, what I rather focus on is optimizing that contact angle from about 4 to 8 o'clock, and then that shoulder should be positioned appropriately relative to the axle. So that's it. So I can't really answer that without seeing an understanding of some of those other variables. So, okay, I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam, Daniel, Kim, and Krieger. You guys had so much great information. I know we're just about done with time, but we've actually taken a picture of all of your questions, and we'll make sure that if we didn't get to them, that we will follow up directly with you guys. They'll have your information and they can reach out to you. So thank you for everyone who is able to join. Thank you to our panelists and Kim for moderating this session. There's so much good information. Our next session is going to be this coming Thursday, June 25th, from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to be focusing on front wheels, valve extenders, and hand ring coatings. So look forward to next week's session. We will send a follow-up email, and this session was recorded, and so you'll have a copy of that session once we send out our follow-up email. But we look forward to next week, and we want to thank everyone for being here, and we hope you have a great weekend.